Hello and welcome to another edition of Giant Talk. I am Roger Longdon. I'm the founder of There Be Giants. We've been running Giant Talk now for crikey about, since 2019 in fact. And you know that we always like to talk about OKRs. That's core to our business in fact. And I'm really, really excited today to be talking to a really good guy from Microsoft, a gentleman called Ryan Lowdermilk, who's joining us, who happens to be quite involved in OKRs over at Microsoft. So, Ryan, welcome to Giant Talk.
The privilege is absolutely mine. I must confess, at the risk of embarrassing you, this is sort of a surreal moment. I am a listener, a longtime listener of this podcast, and here I find myself. Thank you for inviting me.
You've come through the looking glass now. You're on the inside.
Exactly.
So, you're in Microsoft. You're involved in OKRs. Talk to us a bit about your role there, what led you to that, what you've done in the past that's got you to where you are now. Then,
yeah, I think like most OKR coaches who we're speaking to today, I found myself in this position in sort of an odd way. So I don't think it was a linear journey. But what I do at Microsoft, I'm a cloud solution architect. So we have a rather large organization that is responsible for working with Microsoft partners to build solutions, ship those solutions, and then ensure that they're successful. So we at Microsoft, as you know, have always been partner-led. We will always be partner-led. And so what I primarily do is help our Microsoft partners build their OKR practices with obviously our software, Viva Goals. And so that's where we find our focus as well. And then, of course, a good portion of my day job is being the OKR coach for our tech team organization, which is over 200 now from Canada, LATAM, the US, which we call the Microsoft Americas. And I'm biased, but they are the intelligent of the intelligent of the intelligent, super tip of the spear, sharp sword. We fly on the razor's edge of the latest technology, and then our team of architects and strategists help accelerate that development with our partners. It's an awesome place to be inside Microsoft.
Fantastic. So you're working at the spearhead. You're leading those teams in terms of their development of OKRs. You're supporting them in that. Just tell us about how long. What's the history? Is Microsoft new to this? Have you been using it for a long time? So tell us about the journey that Microsoft's had around OKRs.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, if we want to go all the way back, Ally.io was a software that we purchased. I know it was in the month of November. It might have been 2 years ago. It might have been 3. I don't remember. Absolute leading software in regards to OKRs. We purchased that, and then we rolled that into our Viva suite around productivity. And so you think about that, and then you think about the journey internally at Microsoft. There are many organizations now using Viva Goals for OKRs. Will we ever achieve like at the tippity top at Satya's level? I'm certainly, that could be something that we're looking to do. It turns out that may or may not be the sort of answer to success. It's really about organizations coming together and working as one Microsoft, which is what Satya holds us accountable to do. And that turns out to probably be the most exciting portion, which is it's facilitating conversations to get folks working together towards these really, really audacious and shared goals, and then pushing ourselves to reach those milestones. So I think what you see now, I'm an OKR champion, as we call them internally. And I don't know how many of this there are. There are a lot. And we're all sort of in the trenches helping our individual organizations run OKRs.
So are you seeing OKRs kind of help break through the hierarchy? Just across the hierarchy, perhaps?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the ways we look at that is, certainly I think we've always had vertical alignment. That I think we've done well. But to your point, it's the horizontal alignment. And, as the coach of my organization, I've taken really an organic approach. Early on when we were probably in our second or third cycles for us are 12 weeks or basically quarters. And I remember some of my folks saying, hey, like when do we start like sharing KRs with each other? And like, when do we start looking left and right horizontally? And I said, if you follow the framework, it should produce this organically.
Yeah.
And it exactly did that. You started to look at folks because obviously we reflect and reset at the end of every cycle. And as people were reflecting, they saw, oh, wow, that person maybe didn't have the success they wanted, or I think I could have helped here. But then when we got to our next workshop, which was reset, setting those OKRs for the next 12 weeks, here you started to see it happen because we have all of our folks present their next batch of OKRs. And you started to see it. Hey, I think I could help you with that. Or, hey, why don't we get together offline? And so you started to see, and you and I talked about this, more about just business as usual. That stuff is where you get started. But what they started to do was collect around these strategic initiatives. We need to get better at this in our organization. And why don't we build some OKRs to go out and do that? And so I don't know. I'm a big proponent of the fact of allowing just a little bit of room for this to happen organically versus, perhaps maybe coming in and forcing. I think, by the way, both approaches can work. But for us, we gave ourselves some time, and that requires some patience. And not always do you have the time to wait for that.
Yeah, really interesting to kind of reflect on the two different approaches, that organic versus, I suppose you might say, structured. Because, as you say, the organic, you have to have a little bit more patience with. Sometimes leadership teams don't have that patience, and they want to see it in within the next 3 months, within the next 6 months, or whatever. But arguably, I think there's some debate to be had around which approach probably has the greatest longevity. And one wonders whether, if you're going down the organic route, is there a risk? This is a question I suppose I'll put to you. Is there a risk that you end up with numerous different approaches, or do you find that there's still a consistent approach overall because you are working to a single framework?
Yeah, I love that question. I think you do need to hold yourself to a few rules in order to I really like to take, my team hears me say this all the time, low tax, minimum effective dosage. And so we always want OKRs to be a light lift, a low tax. We don't want to spend all of our time working on the OKRs. No. We want to spend our time working on the OKRs, the actual work that it represents. And so we've always had that approach, a low tax, and then minimum effective dosage. I give my folks all the way up to our CVP, they get 5 tokens. So you get 1 objective and you get 5 KRs, and you can spend them however you want. But you don't get more than that. In fact, I had someone ping me this week, and they're like, "Hey, so I've got 6, and I feel like that's okay." And I literally distill. Like, you only get 5, and quite frankly, there's only so much you can achieve in 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
and so what I've seen my folks do, and again, this is something organically that happened, is they start taking 3 KRs. They're like, I'm just going to take 4 because this is what matters most now. And if we can knock these 3 things out of the park, or knock these 4 things out of the park, it will be an amazing 12 weeks. And so I think you have to have a couple of rules like that keep things simple. And then ultimately, for us, our approach is, I want every single team to have OKRs. We do not assign OKRs at the individual level. Microsoft HR doesn't allow us, and we would never do that anyway. In fact, and if you'll allow me to just get on a little bit of tangent, but it's relevant, this question I've received a lot this month, and it is, hey, we've got, imagine, if you will, like a leader who has, say, 5 teams underneath them. And of those 5 teams, they are essentially 5 teams of architects. Yeah. All these architects kind of have the same acumen, the same technology, technological prowess, etc. And they said, hey, if all 5 teams are sort of working to the same objectives, why does all 5 teams have an individual OKR set? Fascinating question, right? Now, ultimately, that question, I presuppose, might be like, hey, I don't want to have to create my OKR, so can we just create a shared one? But also, too, it comes from the approach of like, hey, we're lowering the tax, we're making this, easier. And the position I take is, and the one that we take here in our organization is we're busy creating great leaders. Yeah. Great leaders, which if they leave our organization, or even ultimately leave Microsoft, that we will have given them a gift with OKRs on how to lead people and lead them effectively in a loving and thoughtful way, which means as a leader, you need to sit down and plan. You need to be intimately familiar with your people and your priorities, right? And your pursuit. And so, what I've told those individuals is, yes, you all five might be doing the same thing, and that's business as usual. But what you should be eventually, this comes through maturation, eventually using OKRs, and you've coached me in this, to transform the business.
Yeah.
Not BAU, business as usual, but transforming. And it turns out that that is going to look different on all five teams because you don't know who you have on the bus, right? And you don't know, this person might need to grow in this. And you're intimately familiar with your people and you're leading them and you're growing them. You're not going to do that with a shared OKR at the tippity top. It's just not going to happen. That level of intimacy you lose. So that's the way we look at it. Is you have a few rules, but then, you know, hold your teams accountable to having those OKR sets.
Yeah, that's. I love what you said there about, you know, it's actually teaching them, it's giving them a gift, which they can obviously then use in Microsoft, but also take with them when they go. I think that's yeah. I think that is one of the most positive ways I've heard, you know, OKRs be kind of thought of, be approached. But what I'm curious about, and I'm just going to go back to this point of sort of organic versus structured, is you've got you said you've got a couple of rules that people still follow.
Yeah.
How explicit were you about those rules from the outset? Was there an exercise that you went through to say, look, we're creating this charter or this framework or whatever that everybody kind of, if you're going to be working with OKRs, we need you to work within these guide rails. Was there something that was kind of mandated, or how did you crack that? How did you approach that?
Oh, you know, this is a fantastic question because you live this every single day. It's such a good question. We had a few rules, and a few of those rules were OKRs are not a scorecard. They're not a scorecard. OKRs expect creativity and innovation. We want people transforming the business. We expect creativity and innovation. We number three would be we exercise heavily the four superpowers. So I teach. So those, again, for those who don't know, focus, alignment, tracking, and stretching.
Yeah.
We leaned into those heavily each month, and I really treated them linear. In other words, if you can't focus and align, you probably can't track and you can't stretch. And so we kind of just took those in that order. And so what does focus mean? I taught my folks, focus means 12 weeks. Maniacal focus, every single week, you're checking with, are we focused? What are we doing to push the goal forward this week? And getting your folks together for a 15-minute, what we call a midline. That just happens in Viva Goals. You can float your mouse over a particular KR. It'll have a line there and it says, hey, you're expected to be at 12, you're at 9. What are we doing this week to get 3 more? And I drove that from a focus standpoint. Alignment. This one continues to be a great catalyst for conversation. My folks are massively allergic to a direct cascade. Massively allergic.
Yeah.
And I understand why. But it needs to be aligned. And this has helped us dramatically. And I think everybody in our organization would admit, myself included, that we have a tendency to choose our own adventure. And go off and do some things that we think will be impactful. But then at the end of the year, we do those things and then they wonder like, hey, why? And so we have to force ourselves to be aligned. And that's that second superpower. And then tracking, I sort of alluded to this earlier, week in and week out, driving that rigor. But more importantly with tracking is accountability. And we drive that heavily through our teams to say you need to hold each other accountable. Clear is kind. In other words, you've got to say, hey, you've said now for 2 weeks in a row or 3 weeks in a row that you were going to get 3 in here. They still have 0.
Yeah.
Help me explain. Tell me more.
Yeah.
And lead with, give the person the benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise. And then for stretching, yes, as their coach, I'm holding them accountable to saying this. And we define stretching as this: does this exceed the team's current abilities right now? And again, we get back to being intimately familiar with your people and your pursuit. And so for us, those are some of the rules leaning into those superpowers. We have to have a mission and a strategy at the tippity top with our CVP. That's the rail, the train rail we run on. We've talked about that. But I think those are a few of those rules. And then, last thing I would say, I think maybe a part of our secret sauce is the fact that I coach every one of these individual teams, all 24 at the moment, expanding to 31, every single week for 15 minutes. I spend time with them one-on-one. And we talk about how they're stretching. How are you leading?
Mm-hmm.
How are you challenging? What are your thoughts this week? And go about it that way. So I don't know. I think we do about those 5 things. I didn't give that list a number count, but I think it's about 5 things. And then we just allow people to go on their own journey. And every single person I coach is at a different maturation level. And so we don't have a set curriculum per se. It's just me holding them accountable to those rules.
Right. What really interests me there, Ryan, is to look at the contrast between the way that you have enabled it to develop organically, to evolve, with just a few, principles, as you might say, of just a few rules, versus what a lot of organizations go for, which is, quite heavy governance, quite strict guide rails. I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong. I think it's a lot to do with the culture of the organization. Where I've seen the stronger guidance and clearer guide rails work is, I think, where organizations which have perhaps a real history or real heritage of engineering within them. And I'm not saying Microsoft hasn't engineered in its time.
Yeah, sure. No. I didn't take it that way at all.
No. I'm not saying that for a second, but I think softwares are different. Is when we talk about software engineering, that's been more agile and more iterative for a long time, whereas there are other aspects of technological engineering which I think are still not quite at that level, or perhaps there are remnants of the old ways still in the culture of those.
I think you're spot on talking about culture. I love that you mentioned that, because it's real. And it matters. These are real people with real lives and families and conflicting priorities and whatever. I have to admit, though, and it must be said, lest there's any other OKR coach listening right now, which is like, man, it must be great to be Ryan, and in the sense that I've been given time.
That
right? And
it makes a massive difference.
It makes a huge difference. And honestly, if you're listening today and you haven't been afforded that time, I totally get it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if I did this outside of Microsoft, and had my own firm, it would be really hard to do it the way that I do it, because I'm going to tell the leader, the C-level suite, I'm going to need 18 months. And we are going to, there will be a valley of despair, this as a consultant, where you will look at me and go, this was the worst decision I ever made. And I'm going to look at you and say, I told you this time was coming. And so you really, and I've said this before on other pods, like, I truly believe that OKRs are the most loving and thoughtful things that leaders can do for their people, but that takes time. And so if you're not willing to invest in your company for 18 months to 3 years to change the culture, to give the gift, which is this, that every single person that works in your company will come in every day and know these 2 things. What am I working on? And knowing that it's impactful. That turns out to be extremely powerful and potent, because it turns out that there is dignity in work. There's dignity in work. We were talking about this offline. Like, it's good to come in and have something you're working on and know that it matters. That's a great gift to give individuals, but you can't give that gift without doing some serious hard work and having some seriously hard conversations. And OKRs fortunately facilitate that.
It's the difference between wanting to turn up every day and having to turn up every day.
It's it.
It is.
And that takes time. I'm convinced you cannot microwave this. You might see some, and you and I talked about this, 6 months, right? 6 months, you see maybe the glimmer, but you're not there yet. You're not. You got to get to the 9-month mark and go, man, I thought I knew something and I didn't. And you get to the 12-month mark, you're like, I think I might be getting this. Yeah. And then by the 18-month mark, you're like, okay, I've made enough mistakes. I've failed enough. I think I've got it. And then that's when it gets really exciting because you've got folks now that are transforming the way you do business.
Yeah.
It just takes time.
Okay. I mean, I think there's some really fantastic points that you raised there. You know, you talk about how it can be a gift. Absolutely, I could. I hate to say it, but I've also seen them not under our watch, but I have seen examples of where they've been used as a weapon as well. But you know, it just goes to show in the wrong hands, any tool can be distorted, so to speak. But what I'm interested in is, and you know, you've got best part of 18 months under your belt now. You've got a lot of learning, a lot of experience, a lot of scars, I suppose, from that 18 months. First of all, what has surprised you the most? What would you say over that 18 months? What surprised you the most?
Oh my goodness, that's such a good question. I must preface this question with saying that I have been unbelievably fortunate to not only have time, but work with some amazing people. This is not a one man's journey, you know, to change an organization. It is really not. I mean, I've had executive sponsorship the entire way, and you and I have talked about that is essential. That is non-negotiable.
That's the difference between
it is non-negotiable
and not working.
Yeah, if you're working on an OKR practice right now and you don't have executive sponsorship, it may not last long. But so I've been very fortunate. I think what has been most surprising is I didn't realize how much the weekly coaching was going to matter.
Right.
And I just think it's been so profound to just be able to speak truth into these people's lives for 15 minutes every week and then watch them grow and watch them be challenged. And then, by the way, lest we're confused, I'm learning how to be a better coach as well. And so I think as a coach, and I think I've said this on another pod, you genuinely need to love people in order to be effective in this and try to be gracious and patient. And that has been afforded to me, again, by time and then by executive sponsorship. The individual who runs our organization is just huge in empathy and saying, we're going to be behind our people. We're going to let them, we're going to let them fail. We're going to let them make mistakes. And again, for us, the only failure is not learning from that mistake. That would be a disaster. And that has not been the case for us. So I think for me, what has surprised me is once again, how simple it is that we're messy as people, but as we come together and build relationships and spur each other on, that can be very, very simple, powerful, and potent. And I think that's interesting. And so I don't know how many people take that approach, this 15 minutes per week, but it's been surprisingly beneficial.
Nice. Okay. And you say 15 minutes and you think what on earth could be achieved in 15 minutes, but as you say, it's every week.
Yeah.
And that builds up over time, and I can see why, being a coach myself, I can see why that would make the difference. Yeah. So I think there's some really, really interesting things that have come out of this. I love the way that you've kind of taken an organic approach to it. The one thing which struck me when you were just talking about your coaching there was, though, I think what must be instrumental, and it seems like it's very much demonstrated by your leadership, is that there's obviously a high level of psychological safety in the organization. If they're happy to get behind, the leaders are happy to get behind their, the teams and the people and allow them to fail. Like you say, the only real failure from failure is not learning from it. So has there always been a healthy level of psychological safety there? Is this something that you've seen change over recent years?
Gosh, a great question. I've been at Microsoft now for over a decade. And so I was here when Balmer was here, and I'm now obviously here with Satya. Satya is probably one of the biggest things he's achieved at Microsoft is this sort of growth mindset, not, being a learn it all, not a know it
Mm.
all. Man, that frees you up. It frees you up to blunder and make mistakes. He expects us to learn from them. There's no doubt about it. It's intense here. It is very intense. You're working with the best of the best of the best. And so you quickly know, I might not be the best of the best of the best.
Yeah.
And so you go and work somewhere else. But you have room. You have room to go big and to learn. But I have to once again give a hat tip to our leader, Tony Surma, who leads this organization. He has modeled this to just, he would argue, not perfection, but he has done an amazing job. And it starts with him at the top, and you watch him. You just watch him in meetings. You watch the way he speaks, the way he carries himself, and then people start to kind of lower their posture a little bit, and they start to relax and go, okay, I get it. We're in this journey together. We're going to make some mistakes. We're all going towards these shared goals. But yeah, I mean, I think when you look at it, psychological safety is something that we talk about in the third superpower. So focus, alignment, and then tracking. Tracking is defined by holding people accountable. We're going to track our progress week in and week out. And so we explored that. We explored having psychological safety. And I will say this, the last thing I would say on this is, oftentimes we think as people that asking that hard question to someone is unloving, is not caring. But it turns out not asking that question is just masking our own selfishness. We care more about our comfort. We care more about our position. And so I'm usually trying to encourage my leaders, do you love that person enough to ask them that question? Now, obviously, you need to do it gently and kindly, but it's the right question. In the absence of holding someone accountable, you're just crippling them. You're allowing them to just not produce week after week. And that is just a mean thing to do. Like watching someone just kind of fail week in and week out and never saying anything. That's not a good place to be. So have that courage to do it kindly and gently and say, hey, listen, you told me you were going to get 5 of these done last week. You showed up with 0. Tell me why.
Yeah.
And it's a hard question to ask, but it's the right one.
It is, and you are doing them a disservice if you don't, because you're tolerating underperformance, and there's going to come a point where that's just not going to, the cork's going to burst out the bottle, and it's just going to be, you won't be able to let it ride any longer. So the best thing to do is always nip it in the bud as best you can, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, okay, well, I'm going to come on to my final question, because I don't want to take up any more of your time, because obviously with 20 odd teams to coach, you soon to be 30, you don't have a huge amount of time. Where are you going next with OKRs in Microsoft? Because their use is always evolving, iterating. So what is it you'd like to see OKRs be doing for you, or how are you looking to use them differently in the next few cycles?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I'm on the tech team so my boss's boss. She has about 6 teams. We're one of the 6. And so just recently, after having done this now for 18 months, one of the other teams came, tapping to my boss's boss, right, and said, "Hey, I've seen you guys show up at, quarterly, business reviews. I've seen you show up at monthly business reviews, and you guys have a good beat on this. Obviously, by the way, we never preface, you need really great reporting. So shout out to our reporting team to be able to have us measure these things and report in on them. But yeah, it turns out now I'm going to go ahead and go and coach that other organization, which is the aforementioned 6 additional teams. So we would love to see all 6 teams underneath that leader, which would represent a massive size organization, and seeing if we can pull that off. I must confess to you, that's nightmare fuel for me. But you know what? I'm not going to solve a problem I don't have yet. So that's not a problem I have yet, but that would be exciting. And very difficult, because in the end, OKRs are about human behavior, driving human behavior, the right behavior, and setting people up for success. And that's very difficult. So yeah, that's what we're working towards, and seeing if we can't take that and spread it throughout Microsoft even further.
Okay. Ryan, I have a huge amount of thanks for what you've shared today. I think, when you have these conversations about OKRs, sometimes it can feel like, yeah, we did them the same way as pretty much everybody else. I think what's really come through from our conversation is hearing how, in a large degree, and I know I've already said this a few times, I'll round off by saying it again. I think there's a definite organic nature to how they've evolved, but that's very much being supported by the sponsorship and the space that's being created by your leadership, which is, if any of our listeners are going to take away some key messages from it, I think those are probably the ones to go with. Yeah. Okay. Ryan, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm sure people can find you on LinkedIn if they want to reach out to you directly. It's Ryan Lowdermilk, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And all the best for continuing success with your OKRs in Microsoft.
It has been absolutely my privilege to be here. It'll still feel very surreal when you and I hang up. But yeah, if you want to find any more of this information, I've got a little newsletter. It's called the Little OKR Newsletter. You can find it at the littleokrnewsletter.com. And then I've got a tiny little podcast that is absolutely not nearly as big as this.
It's not all about size, Ryan. Yeah. It's not all about size.
No, it's good. So if you want to find those, then that's great. But again, I can't thank you enough. You have been so gracious, and thanks for having me on.
No, you're very welcome. Very welcome. Take care, Ryan.